to day 2. We're so excited you're here, and I am very excited for our first session today. We've got 3 quick strategies to engage the tech student, which I'm pretty sure all of us need. It's definitely been an interesting year, right? And engaging students is always something that I think all of us are interested in. So with us today, we have Dr. Jay Fuganzio from... And I knew I was going to mess up the name. I'm sorry, Jay.
You're fine. You're right there.
I was right there. Okay, good. From Roosevelt, right, University, and he's a Chicago native and earned his PhD from Oklahoma State University. Dr. Jay has been teaching in higher education for a decade, both face-to-face, online, and has been teaching at Roosevelt University, Heller College of Business since 2018. Dr. Jay is the former chair of the Online Entrepreneurship Education Social Interest Group and teaching and learning scholar for the United States Association for Small Businesses and Entrepreneurship. So very exciting. Can't wait to hear what you have to tell us today.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Jen, for this opportunity. So welcome, everybody. So I am going to share my screen real quick here. Let's see how this goes. All right. All right. So present. There we go. Alrighty, so 3 quick strategies that engage the tech student. So we're going to talk about 3 strategies. Now, I will warn that these strategies may or may not work for your classroom. It's, hopefully the active learning activities can be beneficial to your classroom, especially living in this tech Zoom environment that we're in right now. And perhaps it's going to be the future. I don't know what's going to happen in 2022, 2023, whether Zoom is here to stay or be gone forever. But, there's ways to engage students, whether it's in the classroom or in the Zoom environment. And that's what I'll be talking about. So again, welcome everybody. And so Rebecca basically said all of what I've had to say about myself. How I ended up in Oklahoma State University, I always like to say, well, I probably got lost. But anyway, no, they just offered me, because I was a McNair scholar, and they offered me an opportunity to go study there. And I stuck around for, I think, a little too long than I expected. And that's where also I got started my teaching experience. So my experiences come from, face-to-face environment, online environment, hybrid, fast track environment. So I teach all those different environments, not of course all in entrepreneurship and other subjects as well. So that's why I have that diverse teaching experience. But I've been teaching at Roosevelt again since 2018 at the Heller College of Business, mostly the business plan course, which I'll talk about in my examples of how I use that with active learning activities. So a little bit of the agenda. I want to do a little bit of introductions, but I know we probably can't all unmute ourselves, but that's totally fine. Perhaps in the chat, we would be able to just introduce ourselves because I kind of want to see who everybody is joining us. We'll talk a little about online learners, and I kind of interject using online and tech learners because I basically see them the same thing. So we'll talk about who they are and kind of talk about active learning and the 3 activities or strategies that you can use. And I'll also be talking to you about how I use active learning in the classroom, because in the business plan course, of course, you have to use active learning. You just can't sit there and expect the students to just learn how to write a business plan if you don't get them to practice. So in the chat box, if we could, and if you could just put your name, your institution, and what current show you're watching, whether it's on Netflix, Hulu, or whatever you decide, or regular television, right? It seems like nobody watches regular television anymore, except if it comes to sports. Everybody's on Hulu or Netflix now. But if you are watching your current show, what is it? Just kind of curious, just so we can put some faces in here and see what we have. So Rebecca, all right, College of DuPage, in the dark, okay. I don't really watch anything. Okay, that's totally fine. Masked Singer, right? Nobody's judging here. Okay, the news. Okay. Nice. Okay. Japanese television. All right. This is great. Right. So, all right. Shadow and Bone. All right. The news. The news. Yes. News shows. All right. So this is great. So yeah. So we all watch different things, and glad that we have some people from various institutions here. So welcome everybody. And great to see you. I wish we were face to face, kind of put some faces, but that's totally fine. Hopefully one day we all go back to that space. So online or tech learners, as I like to, we like to talk about. So just who are these online learners, right? This was, of course, pre-COVID, and who knew that COVID would really bring to the forelight of online learners? So, of course, just real quick, some characteristics of them. They have strong academic self-concept, possessing interpersonal communication skills, possessing self-directed learning skills. So they were really, online learners. This was 2007, mind you. This was a research from 2007 of how who online learners were. Of course, the pandemic didn't basically force all of us to become sort of online learners, even though we may not have liked it. We became one. I'll give you a quick example of how it just doesn't work out for everybody. I have a cousin, younger one. He's about 20 now. He actually he goes to he did go to Richard J. Daley Community College in the city of Chicago, and he would tell me I would kind of follow up with him, and he despised the online environment. Like, he's like, I don't want to go back to the online environment. That's not who I am. That's not what I am. And I'm just not going to go back until, the face-to-face comes back and we stop with the Zoom thing, because it's just not who I am. And that was probably a lot of students. So of course, my cousin, he doesn't fit the profile of an online learner. The traditional online learner, again, merging, getting younger, traditionally motivated. They were motivated. And of course, the online environments provide some challenges. So it's not always pretty being a traditional online learner, because there are, they do face some challenges of facing some isolation, very little engagement. In my experiences, I actually, prior to getting my PhD at Oklahoma State, I actually pursued a EDD at a private institution, private Christian university out on the East Coast. It was purely online, really no engagement. The only time we ever got to engage was we would go in the summer to meet with everybody for a week and then go back. And I felt that isolation. Like, this is, there's no engagement, there's no access to community, there's no support really. So I kind of did feel that isolation as a doctoral student. Of course, I left that program and then found Oklahoma State's one. But of course, I do know what it feels like to be an isolated student as a traditional online learner. So shifting now to, of course, what happened with COVID, all of a sudden, we all became online learners, right? We all had to be online learners in a sense, even though we may have to have been, even though we were virtual and live, we still had that online environment aspect. And of course, this picture here depicts us to what happened to a lot of students when the pandemic hit in 2020. A lot of them had to graduate and probably still had to graduate through virtual. So of course, it put a lot of constraint. Students lost motivation. As I give you the example of my cousin, he lost motivation. He didn't want to go back. Of course, difficulties in completing coursework. And the biggest thing, of course, how do you engage students in the online environment? Of course, in Illinois, you can't force, and I can't speak for all states across the United States of America, but I can certainly speak for Illinois, that in Illinois, you can't force a student to open their camera, or to have their camera. They can be in there, and it's like, I told my wife, because sometimes my wife sees like, so does anybody have a camera? And I go, no, not really. Nobody really has their camera on. So it's like you're teaching in a dark room. You walk into a room that's completely pitch dark. There's people there, but you can't see them. You can hear them, but you can't see them. And that's how basically this is how the Zoom environment you're teaching in. teaching in a dark classroom. So imagine closing your eyes like right now, and you're just talking, but you can hear them. So how do you engage those people? How do you make them active in the environment? It's very difficult, I'm not gonna lie, but you can do it, and there are ways to do so. Because you also want to make, and what I found out as well was that sometimes students were actually at work while they were in class during the height of the pandemic, right? Some of them were, because some of them still had to work. And so it's like, well, how do I get them engaged? Like, listen, you have to respect the classroom. I know you got to work, but you have to respect the classroom. You made a commitment for this class. I made a commitment to you. So you have to make the commitment to be active. And of course, I would do activities that would kind of be like, okay, you have to be active in the classroom to be engageful, right? Of course, the students have expressed stress related to online learning and difficulties. Of course, as I mentioned, it's unpleasant experience. They don't like it. Some of them just don't like that online environment. But of course, you know, right now it's just how it goes. And we've probably heard of some institutions going back to face, and then COVID cases or some of that sort is rising up and having going back to the Zoom environment, right? So active learning, now going back into what we see as active learning. So we know who are online tech learners. We've seen what COVID, and more research is going to come along as we move further, like what have been the impacts of COVID in the classroom environment. So we're going to continue to see more research on COVID and its impactness on teaching. On teaching and learning, and what strategies we can use to get the student active in the online environment. So active learning. Right. So active learning is, in a sense, it's by a person's use of information in service of achieving a learning outcome. As the instructor, right, you design an activity that engages the student with a specific outcome in mind, right, to be engaged. So all of the active learning is basically focused on the students, you know, you transmitting the information, and of course, the information, and students being engaged into having specific outcome, right? You're developing the students' skills rather than just transmitting information. So for example, going back, if I was in the classroom, if I was in the business plan course, I'm teaching that, all I did was just blab out information and not making them do activities in the same time as they're building this business plan. By the time they got to the business plan writing, they'd be completely lost because I haven't built the skill for them to go find the resources, to actually write a mission statement, to find who their target market is, or where to find that information. And so, you know, you have to develop those skills, and that's what active learning does. And so, you know, because you don't want to make sure that students, because when you transmit just pure information, the student is just going to remember just enough to pass the exam, the midterm or the final, and then after that, they completely lose everything that you've just taught them. And that they're going to continue and then forget what you say. And so when they get to the next level, they're going to have to relearn everything because they really didn't build any skills per se. You just transmit the information and that's purely it. And that's, of course, active learning. We want to develop the student skills by using some activities that you develop on your own with the specific outcome that I want them to learn in this class, right? So you've done active learning yourself in real life, right? For example, I've had to, as I've gotten older, I realized that things are really expensive, right? When you're a kid or a teenager, like, oh, how expensive it is to change a tire, or how expensive it is to change a battery. It's just chump change. And then as you get older and you're an adult, you're like, oh crap, it is not cheap. It is pretty expensive. And when you go to the mechanic shop and you're like, oh, I got to change my battery, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg to change it when you yourself can probably do it watching a YouTube video. So, you know, about a year ago, so I changed my own battery. I think this is the second time I changed my own battery. I just watched a YouTube video. The guy told me he had the same car I did. I watched his video. First of all, I made sure that he was credible, like he was a mechanic, right? And of course, to change the battery, I did it myself. It took a little longer than expected, but I did it myself, right? Because I was engaging in active learning. I was watching him. He was telling me how to do it, and I actually did it. And same thing when you are baking a new pastry, right? Experimenting in the kitchen. You bake a new pastry, and I know when the pandemic hit, everybody became a baker. Because I remember going into the grocery store and there was like no flour at all, and everybody wanted to be a baker. But we all experimented in the kitchen, learning how to bake a new pastry or learning how to cook a new dish. Those are just examples of active learning, because not only are you watching or reading about it, but you're also actively engaging and putting it together, or changing the battery, or changing the tire, or whatever it may be. So, YouTube is awesome because now you can do a lot of things, and not just changing a battery, but also changing certain things in your house that you can do on your own and save you a couple of dollars. So why active learning? So who cares about active learning? It doesn't matter. Like, why should I even care about active learning? It really reinforces the material concepts and skills that you're trying to build with your teaching. Again, it would be no point for me to teach the class of business plan writing if the students left the class without actually writing a business plan or learning how to write a business plan. Now, will all of them write their own business plan after? Because they're in, let me rewind back a little bit. They're all in groups of at least 4 people who write a business plan, so they're not writing it themselves. So if they left the class not knowing how to actually write a business plan, right, then it would defeat the purpose of the class. Now, will they write their own business plan? Probably not. I don't, it's a pretty lengthy document. It's really stressful, and it's a lot of work. Do I see them opening businesses? Maybe out of the 20, maybe 2 to 5 of them will, 2 to 5 students will, but at least they have that skill that they can take into when they go out and work because most of them, the students are from the College of Business. So they're going to go out and work for a for-profit company. Most of them, maybe a few will work for nonprofits, but they'll have those skills of coming up with a spreadsheet, finding the target market, knowing where the consumers are, where they're shopping, finding that information that's going to really help them out in the future. It creates a sense of community because in the Zoom environment, right, we all feel welcome. We're building a community. Of course, you provide immediate feedback when you respond back, like, you know what? Maybe you should look at this the other way, or, have you thought about this, right? You provide that immediate feedback. You provide the opportunity to think and engage. And of course, again, the most important one, you're developing skills and not memorizing them. Anybody can really memorize things, but developing those skills is even more crucially important to use further on, even after the midterms or after the finals, right? You want to develop those skills. So one of the things, kind of an example. So again, at Roosevelt, I teach the business planning strategies for new ventures course. And one of the reasons why I teach that course, other than having the credentials, I actually wrote my own business plan. Like on my very own, I wrote a business plan when I was at Oklahoma State University. There was a business plan competition. So I wrote one on my own. And prior to that, I was part of a startup company that I was part of, that I was part of the process of, I was in there writing sort of parts of the business plan and fixing up some things. So I had that experience of working with the group on the business plan, of course, also by myself, writing my own full-blown business plan for a business plan competition. And so we use this book called Preparing Effective Business Plans. The author happened to be my actual professor when I was at Oklahoma State. So Bruce Scavenger, so I know him personally. He was actually my professor. And so the book is really great. It actually has a business plan of its own in the book. It's just it's divided into chapters. But one of the things that I do for active learning is, so the objective is students evaluate the potential idea for business success. So one of the activities, so one of the chapters in the book is how to come up with ideas, or ideas, how to come up with business ideas in a sense, right? And of course, coming up with ideas is one thing, but how do you come up with a feasible business idea that's actually going to come out to an actual business? And so I have students come up with a number of business ideas. So I believe it was like five business ideas. And so I had them come up with 5 business ideas. I said, I'm going to give you 20 minutes on your own right now. Come up with 5 business ideas. I don't care how crazy they are, whatever it is, just come up with a business idea. Come up with 5. I think it was 5 or 10. So I give them 20 minutes. So I put a time limit. So I go, okay, you know, go do your own thing. And of course, we're in a Zoom environment. We're not in the classroom. And so, of course, that, you know, and everybody's expected to participate, right? And that's, you know, everybody's expected to unmute themselves and then tell us. You know, of course, I can't force them to turn on the camera, but I can at least ask them to unmute themselves and participate. And so after the 20 minutes or so, I said, all right, we're going to come back. And I said, I don't want you telling me all your business ideas because we just don't have the time to talk about all of them. But I want you to tell me your top 2 ideas in the class, right? So what are your top 2 ideas? And they tell me, well, these are my ideas, you know, the top 2 ideas, whatever they are. Okay, great. And so after that, there's a feasibility analysis tool in the textbook that they go through. So I kind of explained to them the tool and I said, okay, from your 2 ideas, select one and go through the feasibility analysis tool in the textbook and see whether or not your idea is actually feasible, meaning it's going to actually work. It's going to potentially work and make money, right? And so they go through that process. They actually go through that entire process once. So I give them time. Now the class is once a week, about 2, so from 6 to 8:30. So there's plenty of time to work on this. And so usually the class before, you know, I mix the class before the feasibility analysis, we talk about business ideas. And so therefore, when they come back, they already have their business ideas already set forth. So they don't have to waste a lot of time with 2 activities in one class sitting. So after they go through the feasibility analysis, then they talk about, okay, my business idea, this one, the one I talked about, this is the one I went through my feasibility analysis. And the analysis says that my business idea has a potential of, you know, has a potential. They're like, you know what, after going through the feasibility analysis, I realized that my business may not have the capacity to make it, right? And I remind them the feasibility analysis, just like the textbook says, it's not the end all be all. It's not, you know, just because you went through the feasibility analysis, you know, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a successful business. And basically the feasibility analysis, what it takes you through is like, is there a target market? Do you have enough customers that are going to buy your product? You know, is there a window of opportunity available? Like, is this the right timing? Do you have the management powerness to make sure that you have the right people working for your company? You know, how much does it cost to open this open this business? How much money are you going to need? Think questions that makes them really dig deep into whether or not, you know, it's going to be feasible to open this type of business. Again, all students are active. All students have to, you know, pitch their idea, you know, and go through the feasibility analysis and tell us what score they got at the end for their feasibility analysis. And so again, I'm having them actively engaged. I'm not sitting there. I'm not letting them just sit there and just go through the day and not be actively engaged. And of course, every class I have is an activity that's going to help them as they write out their business plan for at the end of the course. Their final is not an exam. Their final is turning in a full-blown business plan, of course, with their group. And so the activities help them out put this thing together, because it's not an easy thing to put together. It's not something that can be done overnight. And it takes a while to build up to a full-blown business plan. And that's just one, right? Activity. So exercise and activities, right? Again, how do you get started? Like, well, I want to do active learning. I want to my students get engaged and learn skills and not just memorize. You know, you want to start small. You don't want to go all out. Become familiar with the few of the activities that you're going to do. What I like, some textbooks provide activities, others don't. It just depends on the textbook you have. So some textbooks, of course, have them. Sometimes you have just to tweak them out a little bit, because it has to fit your classroom environment. Of course, make sure the activities match with the content and what you're trying to do in the classroom. Establish some form of rules. Give students time to complete, be patient, and debrief, right? Sometimes the first time you do an activity, sometimes it doesn't work out like you expected, and that's totally fine. Hey, you just live and learn from it. There's been times, not this class, but other classes, like I've done some activities and they just went, like, I mean, they just completely just were terrible active learning activities. A few years ago, when I was in Oklahoma, I worked for this nonprofit and I taught 8th graders. And one thing about 8th graders, I was teaching them entrepreneurship and personal finance. That was the subject I would teach them. And one thing about 8th graders that I learned is that they're not afraid to tell you whether the activity sucks or not. And they will tell you, right? As you get older, college students and adults really won't tell you. They're like, oh yeah, it was a great activity. And then, oh God, it sucked, you know, behind your back, or, you know, silently, or in the, at the end of the class when they do the evaluation. Yeah, this was terrible, but they won't tell you to your face, unlike 8th graders who will have no hesitancy. So analyzing and evaluating, right? So one of the things, one active learning activity, so getting here into the active learning activities, analyze and evaluate a video, a story, or some artistic work or similar to that. Of course, you want to specify the learning objective. You just don't want to say, okay, evaluate a video. On what? You know, what's the point of evaluating a video? Specify the criteria. For example, one of the things that I do as well is I have them analyze a Shark Tank episode or episodes. Dragon's Den, I left Dragon's Den in there for those who watch British shows. It's a similar thing for Shark Tank. And so I analyze them. Okay, I want you to go find a Shark Tank video, you know, and of course with YouTube, now they've shortened them to like 10-minute clips or 5-minute clips. I said, I want you to analyze this video and I want you to find 3 things that you feel that this company does well and 3 things this company does not well. And would you invest in this company? Why or why not? So again, I give them the criteria, like this is what we're going to do, right? A case study, right? I know not every subject has case studies, and I know in the business school there are case studies. Perhaps in your line of work, in your subject, it may have case studies or some similar similar things to case studies. You can do that. A problem, of course, understand, again, evaluate a problem. You can do a 1-minute paper on a particular problem that you see in society or problem in business. Or, you know, one time I had students, not particularly for Roosevelt, for another institution. I said, okay, go find me something of an ethical problem that's happened in corporate America that you've seen in the news within the last 5 days, and write what's the problem. And that's not hard to find, right? Ethical problems in corporate America is not that difficult to find. It's just making sure that they find it in the right location. And of course, this pizza just made me hungry, guys. I don't know about you, but it just made, and it's only 9:30, so I'm hungry now for pizza. Explaining, illustrating, right, or demonstrating facts, concepts, or skills. So there's these activities, and actually I'm going to share this presentation with you guys. I'll put it in the chat box, or I don't know if Jen or Rebecca are going to share this later on. But there's this really cool activity that is called Your Creative Space. And you can go on this, and basically you have 10 minutes, and the student is actually supposed to draw, right, their creative space. And the cool thing, well, the good thing about this one is they actually have to turn on the camera and they have to show their creative space, right? And I said, listen, you don't have to show your face, just put the creative space document in front of your camera, and then you can turn off your camera afterwards. Most of the time it works. You know, students have hesitancy to do that, but I want to see that at least their creative space, you know, to see what, you know, make sure they're doing it. And of course, there's other one, leadership pizza activity. You actually get to, the reason I have the pizza up here is not to tease you about food, but it actually, you know, they draw a pizza, put slices in. Every single slice is a leadership trait that they have, and they explain it to us, right? So that's another one. They have to explain their leadership pizza. They have to explain their creative space, right? It's getting them active and telling us, right? And we're working on their presentation skills. We're working on explaining themselves, right? Another one is scavenger hunt, answering questions. So, you know, you can do a lot of scavenger hunts online. Again, I had them go find a scavenger hunt, go find a video on YouTube or such on a marketing video that appeals to young audiences in the US between the ages of 18 and 35. I only had one time that it really backfired on me. One student, it backfired on me, and it really, his video selection was, I was like, yeah, you have to remember that we're in a university environment. This is not a bar. This is not a guy zone here. You have to be very careful at what type of video, marketing video you select. So again, putting those constraints, you have to put some rules and regulations, because if you don't, you know, there's always going to be that one student who just likes to push the boundary. And so that's, of course, you can have them do a scavenger hunt as well online, and anything related. So that's one thing. And this is another web. So the University of Michigan has this the spectrum of active learning, and you can see what's as very simple as writing a 1-minute paper to very complex. Forum theater, of course, I'm not a theater class, but you could do some type of forum theater, inquiry learning, hands-on, brainstorming, peer review, group evaluations, case studies, role-playing, jigsaw discussion, informal groups, large group discussion. So this is really cool. So kind of simple, from very simple, you can do very simple things, very short, to very complex. Now, if you're gonna do the very complex ones, make sure you practice it, make sure you actually know what you're doing, plan it out. You know, it doesn't take a long time to plan out writing a 1-minute paper. It may take a long time to actually do site visits. Well, I don't know about now with COVID, but however, with site visits, you can do virtual reality, right? You could do some of the things, right? Or forum theater. So, you know, that's just some active learning. And of course, this website will provide you the link to resources from the Center for Teaching on Learning, Center for Research on Learning and Teaching from the University of Michigan. Oh, what's going on here? Well, anyway, I don't know what happened with that slide, but I think that was it. Anyway, so thank you. Feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm always happy to engage and talk with anybody. I know there's been some questions in the chat box, so I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for Q&A.
Yes, we have had one question in there, and then absolutely, I hope we get some more. Please go ahead and add those in the chat, or share some of your own ideas. I'm guessing I love active learning, so it's always exciting to hear what people do. But here's a question we had. I try to use a lot of small group collaboration in my composition classes, and one of the challenges I had both in the virtual and asynchronous online environment is dealing with students at various stages of the learning curve when we're using some new technology to facilitate online virtual collaboration. Do you have any suggestions on how to get students more comfortable with engaging with different platforms and technologies?
Yes. I would, before you do group stuff, I would kind of do individual activities first to get them comfortable with that activity. And yeah, that could be a problem. I know, especially at the community college level, because I've taught at community college, and everybody's in a different spectrum. You got the 18-year-old kid, you got the 65-year-old person, you got the 35-year-old, you got this, you know, English language learner whose English is a second language, and so you have a variety of people who are technically savvy and not technically savvy. So before you put them into, because it could be very daunting, right? For, you know, let's say, for example, you're a 45-year-old person going back to school, haven't been back in school for 20 years, your tech skills are not the best, and you're in a group with like 3 18-year-old kids who know how to use tech very savvy, and you're like, you know, it's demoralizing in a sense, right? So I would, before you do group activities in that sense, do individual ones. Do maybe 1 or 2 activities by themselves that they can learn the tool, get comfortable. 2 activities probably be the best, individual, then put them into a group. If that's the environment that you're in, right? You don't want to automatically do group activities the first day or the first time, especially when it comes to tech, if you know your student body is all over the place. Right, it's one thing, yeah. So that's my suggestion. Do that. That's what I would do. I really would you know, I've seen it happen. Their faces are just like, you know, so yeah, that's what I would
What do we have to
suggest.
do? Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And then,
Absolutely.
yeah, when they're not engaged, they just tune off and that's it. Forget it. Like they're not going to do anything. And then it's just makes the
Hmm.
group dynamics not that well.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah. All right. So we got a lot of agreement with the individual activities first and then group work,
Yeah.
which makes sense. I like I've seen you mentioned the scavenger hunt in there too, and I remember or I've been a part of some for I think we did for our VNSO, our new student orientation, trying to do that, but I could see, that does tend to be younger students, so trying to
Mhm.
do something with that. I suppose it could be if you even if it was just like in their house or something, and then just trying to do something really basic to start. I don't know, but it's
Yeah,
interesting.
you can. Yeah, that's a good one because you could do a
Hmm.
scavenger hunt. Yeah, go find something around your house, and there'd be more than good. Like, all right, hold on, let me go get something.
And just to get them used to using the technology and sharing it. But I know it's I think it's going to be interesting to see how we go now that I think more students are getting that kind of base level of technology use from their work or from classes, and it's going to be hopefully we can go a lot further with it as
Yeah.
we go forward. So, and yeah, any other questions? Be sure to put those in the chat or share with us your active learning, the activities that you've done in your classes. It's always great to hear what other people are doing. It's helpful for I think for all of us when you hear what somebody else does and you kind of let it spark something for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. I saw yeah, teach eighth graders.
Yeah,
That
no,
was
middle school is whew.
yeah, that was a yeah, that was an
Yeah.
experience.
Oh, definitely a lot of scavenger hunts out there.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
like that's good.
definitely.
Oh, here we go. Here's a question for you. When I think of group work, I think of certain students having to do all the work while others do nothing. How do you encourage students to evenly divide the work?
Great question. So in the business plan course, so usually it's about 4 students, no more than 5, and between 3 to 5 max. They all divide their work. So one person's like the CEO, one person's the chief financial officer, one's the chief marketing officer, one's the chief operating officer. And they all are responsible for a part of a business plan. And what I also realized was, you're right. How do you divide the group? And it sucks that, let's say 3 of the 4 students are all doing all the work and they had to pick up the slack of the 4th student. So
Mhm.
what I started to do was, part of the grade is my grading, what I see. The other half of the grade is your group mates, right? The people you're working with get to grade you, but they don't know what they're going to grade you on. I only get to see that. So you can
Mm.
tell me all that you want, but students will and they are very truthful. They're not gonna turn, they're not. If you put in the work, they will give you the grade. If you don't put in the work, they will really tell.
Mhm.
And so so of course, again, part of my grade and part of their grade. So I have the final say too, and I will see that too. And I always tell students, if someone's not putting in the work, it's better to tell me early than late. If someone's
Mhm.
not putting in the work, email me, put it in writing, because if you don't have it in writing and if I don't have an email, it's very hard to kind of tell the student, hey, you got to put in your work.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you have to, and I make that abundantly clear from the very beginning of the class, and it's written in the you have to put in the work, and it's going to be all group work. So you have to tell them from the very beginning
Mhm.
that it's a group work project. There's going to be group work, and you have to put in the effort. If you don't, I don't know if this
Right.
class is probably the best for you.
Mm. Well, so a couple things too with that. I was an English teacher for a long time, and now I'm on the career services side. And we just had a discussion in a session yesterday about how the skills that employers are looking for, and teamwork is certainly up there with something. So there is actual real reason, like unfortunately, group work doesn't go away when you
Oh
get
yeah.
out into the world of business. So it's never a bad thing for them to learn. But I was curious too, how much of your active learning do you do that it's like within the same class period versus long-term active learning? So it's like, is every class, is there something active that they're doing that's part of that lesson of that day, in addition to things that they're doing that are long-term projects?
Yeah, so yeah, I do my very best because I honestly cannot talk for 2.5 hours. Of course, we take a break, and there's just no way I can talk. My voice just goes out. So, and they're gonna doze out. They're not gonna pay attention to me. So that active learning, just right in the middle, like I pause. All right, let's do this activity, whether it's individual or group activity. And of course, when it's group activity, it's actually with their business plan group.
Okay.
So they're building that camaraderie more with themselves and build that teamwork environment, right? I don't split them off into like, once with their group, they're with them throughout the whole thing, and they're doing all group activities with them the entire semester when I divide them up. But yeah, I do little things every single class to help them build towards the end, and the whole business comes together.
Well, I do that with peer reviews too, with my online classes, is put them all together in one group, because the hope is too that they build up relationships. So then hopefully you don't get those, you don't want to let down your team if you know them on a personal level, because you've been working with them all semester. Like I think hopefully you'd be less likely, they're less likely to kind of drop things with that. Yeah. Well, we've got a couple more minutes here. So if anyone, again, has any questions or other active learning online, especially online, right? Those are, I think, always a bit different to do. I liked your analogy early on about teaching in a dark room, because that is often what it feels like when there's a room full of cameras off. But they're there, right? Like, they do talk. Just have to get them to do it.
Yeah, they're there, but it's just like close your eyes and start teaching. That's how it feels like.
Yeah. I do webinars and go into classrooms a lot, and so I always start with a question just to check in, make sure they're there. All right, here we go. We've got I have a collaborative writing assignment that requires submitting a legend in the top margin of the paper, and each student highlights which part they've done. Ooh,
that's a good one too.
That, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially if you're letting them kind of pick up like what their roles are and what they're going to do with the group work.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, and if they've revised, there's a separate color for that too.
Yeah, that's a good one for that environment, for sure.
And again, eventually, someday, you are in fact going to have to tell your boss what you did as part of the project.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, and how you worked with the other. I will say, interview question, when asked about a group project, don't just say what your group did, say what you did as part of that group.
Yeah. And I tell them, I remind them, and I think a good thing you brought up, to like, group projects, they just evolve more as you get older. It's not gone. Like, you're not going to be, if you want to be individual, then, I don't know, go do something that truck driver or something, because most everything very few jobs that you're individual. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we are at our time. Thank you so much, Dr. J. We appreciate it. All good stuff. I can't wait to go explore all those active learning websites.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Like a